In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his country can win the war against Russia within a year. He was presenting to the Ukrainian parliament what he called his victory plan. Mr. Zelensky said he would refuse to give up any territory to Russia, and he urged his Western allies to invite Ukraine to join the NATO military alliance.
We're a democratic nation that's proven it's capable of protecting Euro-Atlantic relations and the way of life we share with other democratic nations. For decades, Russia was using the geopolitical uncertainty in Europe and the fact that Ukraine is not a NATO member as a factor to challenge our safety. A Ukraine invitation to NATO is fundamental to peace.
So that was President Zelensky in the Ukrainian parliament. Well, I talked a little bit earlier to our correspondent in Ukraine, James Waterhouse, for his analysis of that speech.
Well, I think we're seeing President Zelensky still stubbornly dragging his country towards the West, reflecting the political will of the people in that sense. He'd been talking about this victory plan for some time. Initial proposals of his included the complete withdrawal of Russian forces from his territory. And I was half expecting some kind of a concession, given the realities that surround him in terms of Russia only adding to the Ukrainian territory it has seized and the volatility, shall we say, of Western support for his cause. But there was none. He merely doubled down on that desire for Russia to be forced to withdraw with the help of Western allies. And he did, publish this sort of sizable list, which included the immediate invitation to the NATO alliance, where all political signs point to that being a great distance away for Ukraine. The further strengthening of his forces, the permission to use Western missiles deeper inside Russia, that permission has yet to materialise. But he also tried to frame things as an investment opportunity in terms of allowing Western allies to help protect Ukraine's natural resources and economic opportunities, as he put it. And then he even put in a vision for Ukraine after the war, where he looked for Ukrainian troops to be stationed in other European countries to share their own expertise from the full-scale war they have been fighting. So he has elaborated, but I don't think his position has changed. And this is a country which where morale has been gradually damaged through the relentless onslaught of Russia's invasion, a controversial mobilization law, and a future that is far from certain. And yet he's doubling down. But when you're so reliant on help from the West, from the US, it may not be in his control. This victory plan will need the support of the next US president.
James Waterhouse, there have just been a few comments from NATO's new Secretary-General Mark Rutte about what President Zelensky was saying he's very much aware of the elements of President Zelensky's victory plan. We're in touch with our allies about next steps. And also Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary-General, saying the victory plan presented by President Zelensky today is not only about an invitation to NATO membership. So some guarded comments there, I think, from the new Secretary-General of NATO. And I've also been discussing what President Zelensky was saying with Brad Bowman, who's Senior Director of the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies. And he gave us this analysis.
There are many uncertainties. A winter is looming, of course, and President Putin once again is wanting to leave Ukrainians in the dark and in the cold. And I'd say President Zelensky is making the case to the Ukrainian people, as well as to other Europeans and to Americans about what he sees as the path forward and what he needs to accomplish it. And, Russia's response was sober up. That was the quote. And my view, as someone who's looked at this for a long time, is that his plan depends on Europeans and Americans sobering up to realize that helping Ukraine is not charity, but is a wise investment. And as President Zelensky said, the outcome in Ukraine, he argued, and I agree, is going to impact what happens in the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific, because it's going to affect their perception of what Americans, Europeans are willing to do when we see naked aggression, as we've seen some Vladimir Putin, at least since February of 2022.
If Donald Trump does walk back into the White House, there's been a lot speculated about his views on Ukraine and whether, well, he's talked about maybe ending the war in a day. But what do you think that would mean for Ukraine, for President Zelensky, if Donald Trump becomes president once again?
It's I would say it's one of the largest or the largest sources of uncertainty right now is the outcome of the presidential election. I think if past this prologue, it's fair to say that you would have a very different American foreign policy toward Ukraine and Russia based on who wins the election. I think there's broad and deep support, bipartisan support for Ukraine in Congress, as evidenced by the billions of dollars in weapons that have been provided. But there's no doubt that a President Trump would have a different policy than Vice President Harris, and so this is clearly an uncertainty, source of uncertainty.
And President Zelensky, in his victory plan, he ruled out giving away any territory, but ultimately, whenever it is, do you think Ukraine will have to sit around a table with Russia and carve up the map in some way?
My hope, both for the sake of the Ukrainians, for American European interests, is that the Ukrainians would be able to evict invading Russian forces from all of Ukraine, including Crimea. But I don't see a path, at least in the short to medium term, to get from here to there. And so that's a problem. And so President Zelensky himself has said that one of the goals here is to try to compel Russia to negotiate. But I think Vladimir Putin is very happy to continue to send tens of thousands of Russians into the meat grinder there. He doesn't care. This is a war of imperialist aggression for him. And I don't see any sign that he's wanting to stop it.
That was Brad Bowman from the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies.